Hi Year 5, welcome back to chapter 15 of The Day I Fell into a Fairy Tale. So Lana and Harrison have just returned to the supermarket after being in the story, and they thought it was the end. What they just witnessed was pretty happy, but the old man back in the store has promised them that is not the end of the story. It's not a happy ending, and has asked Harrison to read Lana the rest of the story that night. That night, for the longest time, Lana lay wide awake in the darkness, unable to sleep. It had been a long day, and Harrison said he was too tired to read the rest of the story, promising that they'd read it in the morning. She turned over and stared at the hunting horn on her bedside table, thinking about the weird and wonderful events of the past few days. The little old man couldn't have been right, could he? Surely Briar Rose was safe now that the 13th fairy's curse was broken. She closed her eyes, willing herself to go to sleep. Of course, everything was fine. The little old man had been mean to her from the moment they met, and now he was just trying to frighten her. Nothing more. Feeling calmer, Lana closed her eyes and began to drift off, but as she did, an image formed in her mind. Briar Rose and Prince Otto were standing under a rose arch in the palace garden. Both of them were older. The sun was shining. Briar Rose wore a beautiful white wedding dress, and as the pair kissed, all the guests leapt to their feet, applauding wildly. The king and queen beamed happily at one another, but then something strange happened. Briar Rose was trying to speak, but no words were coming out. Her hair began to flout, as if she was under water, and she reached out, her eyes widening in fright, as if she was struggling to breathe. "Help me, Lana!" she mouthed. "Help!" Lana opened her eyes. What did that vision mean? Was Briar Rose in danger? She had to find out what happened next in the story. Her brother was all twisted up in his bedclothes and snoring softly. "Harrison," she whispered, shaking him gently by the shoulder. "Wake up!" Harrison opened his eyes, and then shut them again. "I had a really weird dream. I think Briar Rose is in trouble." "Go to sleep, Lana." "Wake up!" insisted Lana, shaking her brother and accidentally nudging his soldier force display, which began to cascade down the shelves beside his bed, making a horrendous racket. "Lana!" hissed Harrison in irritation, doing his best to stem the flow of plastic soldiers. "Shh! We need to find the book. It'll be in Mum's sock drawer. It's where she puts everything she doesn't want us to find." "Okay," said Lana, and padded off across the landing. There was a long pause, while Harrison battled with his thoughts. One part of him wanted nothing more than to go back to sleep and forget about fairy tales and Lana. But another, slightly bigger part of him was curious to know what happened to Briar Rose. Besides, if it really was as scary as the little old man said, Lana would need some company. So, when Lana came quietly out of their parents' room with the book, heading for her bedroom, he hissed for her to join him. "Put my light on," he said. Then he opened the book of fairy tales, turning the pages until he found the part of the story where Briar Rose and the prince got married, and began to read out loud. And this is pretty much what he read. After some time, Briar Rose and the prince fell in love and got married. The prince came to love the king and queen as he would his own parents, and they all lived happily together in the castle as one family. The king and the prince spent their afternoons practising archery, while Briar Rose and her mother enjoyed wild swimming together in the newly restored castle moat. More time passed, and Briar Rose gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The king and queen were delighted with the new arrivals to the palace and suggested a grand party, but Briar Rose and the prince politely declined, with thoughts of the 13th fairy and Briar Rose's curse in their minds. Instead, they gave their two children the simple names of Hansel and Gretel, and had a small gathering for a few close friends. As more time passed, Briar Rose and the prince grew tired of the pomp and ceremony of the palace, and decided to step away from their royal duties. They moved out of the castle into a simple house on the edge of the village, and sent Hansel and Gretel to the village school. Briar Rose made and designed her own range of swimwear, which was extremely popular, and the prince set up a hunting shop that made premium bows and arrows, much to the joy of the king, who became his best customer. But their problems were far from over. Unbeknown to them, the 13th fairy was now living in a cottage in the middle of an enormous forest. By now her years of wicked spells had made her an outcast with the other fairies, and she'd taken on her truer form as a witch. Her magic had become stronger than ever, and the little brown bird that had once been her companion had now become her familiar. A familiar, as you probably know, is an animal that acts as a witch's eyes and ears and helps her work her magic. One day, as the witch was tending her garden, the bird alighted on a nearby tree and began to sing. Tra-la-la-la and a tra-la-la-lee, she has a beauty for all to see, sang the bird. Who does? Inquired the witch, but the little bird flew away without giving her an answer. The following day, as the witch was sowing lettuce, the little bird reappeared. Tra-la-lee, tra-la-lee, and tra-la-la, the prince he came from a country far. What prince? Demanded the witch, but once again the bird just flew away. On the third day, the witch decided to trick the bird. When it started to sing, she pretended she couldn't hear and just went on tending her garden. Tra-la-loo and a tra-la-liss, the prince he woke her with a kiss, sang the bird. But the witch ignored it. Tra-la-lee and tra-la-loy, she bore 2 children, a girl and a boy, sang the bird, hopping a little closer. Still the witch said nothing. Tra-la-lee and tra-la-loon, 2 children fair as the sun and moon, the bird sang, hopping right onto the handle of the hoe the witch was using. Quick as lightning, the witch snatched the little bird by its wing. Tell me who you are speaking of, she threatened as it fluttered helplessly, or I'll pull your feathers out one by one. Don't hurt me, mistress, please, begged the little bird. I'll tell you everything I know. I'm listening, said the witch. Briar Rose, the princess you put a spell on, has woken up. She's married Prince Otto, the son of King Otto VI of Dreitsmark, and she plans to live happily ever after. The witch burst into laughter, as if it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Does she indeed? She chuckled. Please let me go, begged the bird, and I'll never tease you again. Very well, said the witch, but first I've got a job for you. Soon after, the prince's father, King Otto VI, was admiring himself in the bedroom mirror when the same little bird tapped on the window glass. Please come quickly, it chirped. Someone's being robbed in the woods. Now, the king was a good man, and so wasted no time in coming to rescue. He arrived in the wood to find robbers trying to steal from a beautiful damsel. So he saw off the thieves, lifted the lady up onto his horse, and carried her back to the castle. There he gave her cool water to drink, and fed her bread and honey from a golden plate. At last, said the damsel with satisfaction, a king who knows how to treat a lady. Of course the king fell in love with her immediately, and they were married the very next day. But the damsel was really the witch in disguise, and while the king was greeting the wedding guests, the new queen stole upstairs to his bedchamber. She took up the king's pen and wrote a note, copying his handwriting exactly. Beloved daughter-in-law, I should very much like to meet you and my grandchildren, and for you all to meet my new bride. Please come and see me at your earliest convenience. Yours faithfully, King Otto VI of Dreitsmark. The queen stamped the letter with the royal seal to make sure it appeared the king had written it himself. Then she sent the note to Briar Rose by messenger. It so happened that when the note arrived, the prince was away on a hunting trip, but excited by the invitation, Briar Rose decided to make the journey alone with the children, leaving a letter for her husband so he could join them on his return. It was a long and difficult journey, and when Briar Rose and the 2 children arrived at the castle, she was surprised to find it empty of everyone except the new queen. Briar Rose, said the queen warmly, thank you so much for coming. Do I know you? Asked Briar Rose, feeling a flicker of recognition. We met twice, very briefly, replied the queen, when you were younger, once at your birth ceremony, and once at one of your birthday parties. I was a friend of your father's, and now I'm your mother-in-law. Briar Rose frowned slightly. Something didn't seem quite right, but she wasn't sure what. Where is the king? He has gone to prepare our house in the country, and I am to bring you to him. That sounds wonderful, said Briar Rose. When do we leave? Now, said the queen. Really? Asked Briar Rose in concern. But the children and I are very tired from the journey. I'm afraid so, replied the queen. That way we can be there by nightfall. And so, without delay, the queen and Briar Rose set off along the forest path, with Hansel and Gretel following behind. Eventually, after many hours' riding, they came to a wide river. Come, said the queen, the river is very fast, so we must cross by boat. She helped them in and took the oars. See how fast the river runs, she called, as they reached the middle where the current ran quickest. They say if you look into the water, you can glimpse your future. I can see fire, said Hansel, looking overboard and seeing the reflection of the sun. I can see earth, said Gretel, peering into the depths and glimpsing the bottom of the river. All I can see is water, said Briar-Rose, leaning towards the river. And then, quick as a flash, the Queen pushed her in. Of course, Briar-Rose was a strong swimmer with lots of experience in wild water, and though the current was fast, she fought bravely against it. Help me, spluttered Briar-Rose. I'm drowning. Stupid girl, taunted the Queen. It's me, the 13th fairy, now the most powerful witch in all the kingdoms. As she spoke, her hair turned white and her eyes clouded red. Help us, mother, called Hansel and Gretel. Goody, goody, Briar-Rose can't help you now, crowed the witch amidst gales of cruel laughter. No one can. Ooh. So it looks as though they've linked it with the Hansel and Gretel story maybe a little bit, seeing as that is now Sleeping Beauty's children. So let's see what happens in tomorrow, chapter 16. Bye!